Welcome to PHP Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're here for another Monday mini-sode.
Yeah, we need, man, I keep talking about building like a good Monday mini intro. Like go like Monday mini. You know, we were talking about going to a Monster Jam. They have Monster Jam coming up here pretty soon.
I went.
Did you?
Yeah.
It's just so expensive. I was like, you know what? I can't afford those tickets.
Let's be real. It's expensive because of resellers.
Really?
Yeah. Have you gone on there? So what do you, okay, this is not related to the episode at all. Maybe we should have this off the podcast, but anyways, it's when I go to buy tickets, like if you bought them when they first came out, they're like $30-$40 a person. But when you go there, it's verified resale tickets. So like I dropped a major, I paid $100 a piece.
Yep. Yeah. I was like,
it was money.
I'm not paying that.
But it was one of those things where it's like, so, you know, your son still has a few more years that it's still the glory years that he can still go. This was probably going to be like the last year that I could go with my youngest. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to drop that $200. I think it's staged too. Do you think it's staged?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it's like WWE.
Yeah. I mean, they're still really putting themselves out there doing crazy stuff. But yeah, a lot of it. I mean, some of it's, you know, fly by the seat of their pants. But you know, there's certainly some staged elements to it. They're performers and they put on a great show. But anyways, all that to say, I wanted some kind of intro.
If you're still listening,
Monster Jam, but like Monday Mini.
So if any of you with the talent and skills want to create something that goes Monday Mini-sode or something like that,
Pure Hustle Podcast.
Let us know. We're giving you the sound bites right now. So
well, we were, but you were talking over it.
Okay, so try it again. Try it again. Stop it.
We
Pure Hustle Podcast.
All right. So today we're talking about some reselling myths. So there's a lot of, we had a really successful episode a while back where we talked about resellers kind of lying, especially reseller influencers lying. And I think that was good that we kind of went through some of the ways in which there's some ambiguity in the reselling community and really trying to bring light to some things. But there's also some really prevalent myths that people believe about reselling. So we want to debunk some of those myths, and maybe you can think of some other myths below. Let us know in the comments. What are some of the things you hear about reselling that just simply aren't true? Or maybe we're wrong about one of these, or you have a different take on them. So let us know in the comments below what your thoughts are on these reselling myths.
And we may do a full extended episode. We've had a couple of these already that we've done, but it's been a while. So maybe it's time to revisit. But so the number one thing I've heard from day one is reselling is too saturated, which means there's no money to be made.
Yeah. And the reality is that can certainly be the case in individual markets, individual niches. There might be an oversaturation, but it's like anything. There's going to be it's going to ebb and flow. There's going to be times where sneakers are hot, or certain types of cards are hot, or certain VCRs are hot, or whatever it is, a certain brand, and it gets really popular because people start blasting it out, and then everybody's buying it, and then the market gets flooded. And if you're only in that one spot, you're in a bad place. But the reality is there is so much to resell. There's so much you can go out and get. There are a lot of resellers out there. In fact, when I go to thrift stores or garage sales, I'd say a good percentage of the people who are there are probably also resellers. So there is a lot of competition. There's a lot of people out there buying and reselling. But think about how much inventory is moved on eBay on a daily basis.
Oh, yeah. Tons. Not just eBay, Depop, Mercari,
OfferUp, Facebook Marketplace.
All the platforms. So what I would say that it's too saturated is there's two ways to combat that. One, you don't go into those saturated fields. Or two, recognize that even in those saturated fields, there are items that people are still looking for, right? For example, one of the most saturated fields right now, I think is still Harley Davidson. But Harley Davidson is still a consistent seller. Doesn't sell for as much based on the items, but you can still do well. So don't let that talk about it's too saturated. You know, there's no point telling you. I've been doing this for 10 years. It's always saturated. It's all about finding the stuff that people want. Remember, reselling is one of the most oldest professions in the history of mankind. And it continues to be.
Yeah, so. It's a great profession. And it kind of leads us to this next myth of there's not enough stuff to source. And if you're only going into a thrift store, you go to one or two garage sales, it can certainly feel that way. When I first started, a lot of it was I didn't have a lot of knowledge of what would sell. You know, Orlando gave me like 4 or 5 different types of items to look for and a couple brands in each. I watched a couple of YouTube videos, and you go to some garage sales, you just don't see anything. And so what I did when I first started going to garage sales and thrift stores, it's like, well, I'm not seeing any of, the type of Hawaiian shirts he told me to look for, and I don't see any Doc Martens. So what I'm going to do is, since I'm already here, I'm just going to scan everything and I'm just going to look up everything. I looked up so many shoes until I figured out like, yep, these are the Walmart cheap ones. These are the ones that are a little bit more money. And then I started scanning electronics, and then I started figuring out which ones sold and which ones sold for parts and which ones. And part of that, almost like just being naive and not knowing and looking up everything, really helped me, because now when I go to garage sales and thrift stores, I can find something. And if I can't find anything, I'm going to spend a little bit more time researching. And I don't have to spend as much time researching now. I could pass through majority of the stuff because I've already scanned and looked up those prices on those items. But I mean, we've had the conversation before. Like, there was times where I'd go out garage selling, especially towards the first year or so of reselling, and I'd say like, man, like there's days where like I'm lucky to make $50 profit. And you're like, it's just because you don't know what to look for.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that if you're not finding enough supply, it's because you just don't know enough. Right. And I'm not trying to diss anybody. I've been in the same place where I remember going to a thrift store and I spent the whole hour and I'm like, there's nothing to make money on. Or I spent entire days. I mentioned before where I took a week that I was going to act like I was a full-time reseller and go to thrift stores every day, and I didn't find very much. I'm like, I don't know if I could go full-time. And now 5 years later, I'm still going full-time. And it's not because there wasn't anything there. It's just I didn't know what to look for. So don't be discouraged over time. As you know, Mike said, now Mike could walk. I think Mike and I could walk anywhere in a thrift store, garage sale for the most part, and find profitable items pretty quick. So, all right. The other myth, and hopefully I say this right, is I hear a lot is like the only way you can make money in the reselling space is not by reselling goods, but by selling courses on how to sell goods.
Yeah. And the reality is that is a huge market. And what has given that a bad name is there are a lot of semi resellers, or people who kind of resell,
or they're like 3 months and like time to drop the course,
or that maybe they've been a full-time reseller, but then they've kind of switched from reselling to selling courses, and they do make more money doing that. And the hard part is it almost becomes like a pyramid scheme, in the sense of there needs to be people like the big influencers out there who are putting out information. It's really helpful. It gets a lot of people who know nothing at all to learning something. And sometimes buying a course, if you're the kind of person who doesn't have the time to learn, or you're not the kind of person, you're not self-learner or self-starter, reselling in general is going to be hard for you if you're not willing to. All the information's free. All of it's free. There's nothing that's not free to find out about reselling, if you're willing to put in the time, a little bit of research. People sell courses and they make a lot of money doing it, but there are I can't tell you how many times we talk to resellers who have a reselling business 10 times more successful than anything we could even imagine having. And they don't have an Instagram. They don't post anything on YouTube. They don't talk about their reselling other than to like maybe their friends. And the thing is, because those people live a quiet life, it's hard you don't see them. So you don't know that there's a lot of people doing it that aren't out there trying to sell courses, because a lot of the people who, even if they're not trying to sell a course, but the people who are trying to build a presence on social media, you get the idea that, well, they wouldn't be if they were making that much money on reselling, they wouldn't be trying to, build this presence and do this. They would just resell. But be encouraged that there are a lot of people out there, and probably many of you listening, who are like, yeah, I've got no desire to start a reselling YouTube channel, but you're doing just fine reselling.
Yeah, agreed. There's so many people behind the scenes. It's crazy. All right. The other one is eBay takes all your profit. There's no point in reselling. What are your thoughts on that one?
It definitely stinks, I guess is the best way I could put it, that you've got to pay your fees. People have called it fee-bay. They've made some changes over the years that I'm really proud of and I really enjoy. They've made a few changes that I'm not so happy with. But the reality is that's the overhead that we're paying. And one, all of that stuff is a tax write-off. All those fees, all those things, you're writing them off. And two, if you had a brick and mortar store, or if you were building your own website and trying to advertise your items yourself
globally, by the way,
and dealing with the payment management and dealing with you would be glad to pay a couple dollars per item that sold, unless you were like trying to build the next Amazon and putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into websites. There are other platforms you can use. You can kind of have your own thing going on Etsy in some ways, but there's still going to be fees. Anytime what you're doing is you're paying for a service. And if you had a brick and mortar store, or if you were trying to do online without the infrastructure that they've already built, you're going to be paying more than the fees cost on eBay, hands down.
Agreed. And you would not get as much traffic, right? 182 million active users on eBay in comparison to, I don't know how many, maybe you get a few million here and there. So again, and the fee, no one likes fees, right? But the fact that you could pay, a 10-cent insertion fee to get an eBay listing up, right? And you could have it go global where people throughout the world can see it, right? You couldn't do that unless, like Mike said, you put millions of dollars into something, let alone the algorithm. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. So, all right. And this is my favorite one out of all of them. This myth, I hear it all the time, especially now since we've had that $600 threshold, right? That's been established that, the IRS wants you to report anything that you make in reselling above $600, is the idea that you can only make so much money in reselling due to taxes.
Yeah. I mean, taxes are one of those things, like death and taxes. Those are the only two certain things, right? But here's the thing. There's two ways of looking at this that will help you get through this. One is there are so many tax write-offs. In fact, I was talking to a guy recently at my work who's thinking about buying a house, and he did some delivery for Amazon, and he's wanting to make his taxes look like he had a higher like gross or net amount for the year. So he's like, I think I might not even write anything off for my Amazon because I'd get a bigger tax return, but I want it to look like I made more money. The reality is the benefit of being kind of an independent contractor or being a self-employed doing this reselling thing,
even on the side.
Yeah, doing it on the side, is you can write off so much. Every mile you drive, every time you're buying items to sell, when you're buying your bubble from Bubble Boy, using our link, when you are paying those eBay fees, when you go out to eat and it's a business related expense, or you're going and traveling and you're staying at hotels, you're renting a van, all of those things are tax write-offs. And you can actually get to the point where you're really not paying as much in taxes as you think you're going to end up paying. And then two, the other thing that's really beneficial is, and just a good paradigm way of looking at it is, even if it's say no matter what you write off, you're going to be stuck paying 20% of your income. You can look and say, well, I'd rather not have to pay the IRS another $10,000. Well, you could do that, or you could realize I'm paying them an extra $10,000, but I'm making an extra $50,000, right? So which would you rather have? Pay them $10,000 and have $40,000 in the bank, or not pay them $10,000 and not have that $40,000 in the bank? So the more taxes you have to pay is kind of a sign that you actually have more money, more net. I mean, it's gross what they do to it. It's gross what they're going to do to your gross, but it's still, I'd rather pay more taxes and have the money than to not have to pay any taxes at all and not have any money.
Yeah, I always I had never understood this one, because people are like, oh man, don't make more than $20,000 because then you're going to get a 1099 from PayPal. And this was before this new law came into effect. I'm like, okay, so you just only want to make $20,000 a year? Like, that's it? Like, you don't want to make 25 or 30 or 50?
Now there's that 100? Line, right? So if you were trying to get away, because you should have been paying taxes no matter what. Like, that's
from 1 cent and above.
Yeah, technically that's what you're supposed to do. But I understand if you're trying to like fly under the radar, and I'm not saying that anybody should do this, but if you were in your mind, the way you were thinking, I think this is where a lot of people come with this of, if I make $19,000 and I don't pay any taxes because I can kind of get under the table on it, then that's great. But if I make $20,000 and 1 cent, I might end up owing $5,000. I would have been better off just making the 19, right? I wouldn't have had to pay anything. So that makes sense if you're trying to like sneak under the table, because there's that threshold. Now, if you were changing of 20,000 versus maybe making $100,000 that year, okay, you pay the taxes. But there's that, like, it's the same thing I've heard of people who on like some kind of state like aid of some kind, and they get a raise at work that's like an extra $1 an hour, and it actually costs them more money because it bumps them out of the state aid they can get. So it's like, I'd rather not have that $1. But if it was a $10 raise at work, it'd be worth it. And so there is. But
you always want to be going up, Mike.
Well, I agree. But there is like that weird threshold. Like if you're just on the cusp and you were trying to be under the table, and we are not advocating that at all. But I could see where this myth comes from. Well,
I mean, there was a time I used to get a discount on like my electrical bill and a discount on my healthcare and all that. But you know what? I'm glad that I have a greater taxes that I need to pay on things now, because I'm doing better than I was before. Do I hate the taxes? Sure, I do. No one likes taxes. Okay. Oh, maybe there's some out there. Don't know. But anyways, don't let that hold you back from moving forward in your reselling business.
Yeah.
All right. So hopefully this helped you debunk some of these reselling myths that are maybe holding you back or others are challenging you with. And as always, there's plenty to be made. There's plenty of opportunity out there. And with that being said, make sure to be real,
Be relevant,
and be reselling. Late.
Peace.